And we are underway. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us for today's Parlor Car Chat. We're looking at the front page of the museum's website, which reminds us each week or each time that these Parlor Car Chats are a program of the San Luis Obispo Railroad Museum. We do them not every Saturday. We got stuck with Saturdays at 10 o'clock Pacific, but not every Saturday. And we'll talk about that in a little while. We're going to take a couple weeks off before we go to our next one after this is done for Thanksgiving stuff mostly. And this also reminds us that the museum is very welcoming of any donations you might like to make, and there's a way to do that on the website under that support tab, you might say. They've had basically no income for the year since they've been unable to open. So if you feel motivated to do that, that would be wonderful. Moving right along, jumping right into our topic for today, which is the Alvin All-Star Railroad. This is a project, and what we're looking at here, by the way, is the A page on the project's website, which you can see there at the bottom left-hand corner, and that link, along with a few others, will be on the Parlor Car Chat page after this as well. So here's a synopsis of what's going on, or a list of stuff that we're going to be looking at today. But I just want you to know that the important thing here is that this whole unit that we did for this classroom is documented to where anybody who was motivated to do it, and it does take a lot of effort, could pick this up and run with it again. What you need to do this is basically a couple of three people. You need a classroom teacher who wants to bring a model railroad into their classroom and integrate the railroad with everything else that she's doing in the classroom, whether that's history or math or science or literature, even grammar to a certain extent can be integrated with this thing. That's what makes it really fun and really valuable. And there's a few other things that we augmented the program with too. So you can see on this screen, there's a page for teachers, which if a teacher could go there and get a look at the overview and then look at each individual things. There's samples of actual events and activities that took place in each of the 2 years that we did it. There's the library that we built, railroading and railroad history in the Santa Maria area. Oh, I should mention, this project was referred to as the Alvin All-Star Railroad, and that's because it was done at Alvin Elementary School in Santa Maria, and they were the All-Stars. They weren't the Bears or the Vultures or the Tigers or the whatever. They were the All-Stars. So that's why Alvin All-Star Railroad became the name of this unit. So, and then you see here on this page, we had the kids design a logo for this project. We made patches from that logo. We'll see all this later in more detail. Name tags. We did thank you notes. We had a number of classroom presentations that my dad or I did, which was the other key part. Not only do you need the classroom teacher, but you also need a model railroader and or a railroad historian / economics / current modern railroads, etc. guy. And those two could be in one, but in our case, it worked out really well in that Lynn was a classroom teacher. My dad, Bill Foster, was the modeler, and I kind of provided everything else in terms of modern Santa Maria Valley railroading and the history, important history moments, and all that sort of thing. Vocabulary, we actually grew sugar beets. We'll see later. We did a number of field trips. And let's see, here's some more of that. the listings of the various bits and pieces. All I'm trying to get across here really is that this really does document the whole project to a degree that you could pick it up and run with it if you were so inclined. And it was not just the model railroad, but it was integrated across everything third graders were studying. And there's some good examples: art, geography, economics, culture, reading and writing, study skills, visual learning, map and globe skills, critical thinking. We linked it into to everything. Okay, so let me apologize right up at the top for the quality of these pictures. They were taken 18 years ago. I didn't have the best of cameras or equipment or even really knew what I was doing. It was early on in my picture-taking career, you might say. But this is a picture of where we're headed. We're going to show you a lot about how we got there. But this is more what the layout looked like at the end of the unit, at the end of the project. You can see that the trains and track and ground covers and buildings and all that sort of stuff are there. It's not quite as clear in this picture as it will be in others, but the kids could operate this railroad, 6 kids at a time. There was two power packs. Each half of the platform was separately controlled power-wise, and then there were 2 positions where switchmen needed to be or could be to operate the whole thing. And I guess I haven't said either. What we're modeling here is Henry Valley Railroad, and we'll look at that in more detail. One of the things that made this possible was the way the platform was constructed. We only had our allotment of space in the classroom was basically a 4x8 foot for a 4x8 sheet of plywood, quote unquote. So since this platform is going to be moved in and out and moved around and all that sort of thing, being light, not heavy, and being very rigid, since it was probably going to be straddling a couple of classroom tables or something to that effect, or what do you call the workman stands? Anyway, put feet under it somehow. It had to be sturdy to stretch across whatever space there was. So Dad built this basically not with 2x4s or anything even close to that. He built I-beams for the basic construct, and you can see those in the upper left-hand corner to some degree. There was a stronger board along the top, and then there was a thinner board that provided the bending strength, or anti-bending strength, I guess, and we refer to those as the I-beams. I guess technically they're more like T-beams. I don't know if we put the I on the bottom or not. I don't remember. But it made a very thin sheet of plywood, and this frame very strong. Let's go to the next picture. Here you can see it more in place. There were 6 of these beams inside, quote unquote, and then the structure, the strength of the outside was just attaching a frame around it. And here you can see in the lower right, the half that was shown in the upper left is now covered with a sheet of thin plywood where you can start laying track and that sort of thing. And then the other half of the platform, Dad is in the process of construction. You don't see any of the 6 I-beam in there yet. And we also built a Excel spreadsheet, by the way, on the website. You can access it, that gives you the angles that those 6 internal beams in the upper left-hand picture, these extra, it calculates all these angles for you, both here in the center and out along the far edges, when you enter your width and your length of the platform. So that made it a little handy for anybody who wants to ever do this. And here's a diagram of the layout. this is a 4x8 sheet of plywood. Down the center is a divider, that solid black line, that was just a styrofoam kind of thing. It might have been a little more stronger than that, that went up from the platform about a foot or two. I forget exactly how much, but it separated visually the two halves of the railroad. And as you know, probably, the Santa Maria Valley Railroad is a point-to-point railroad that goes from Guadalupe down to Betaravia, on into town, and on out to the airport. And the portion here that we've chosen to model is from the sugar mill area out west, or towards the west end, and then going into town and getting to where the downtown depot is, and the roundhouse and the Miller Street Yard. Of course, those are no longer used. Those were abandoned some number of years ago, but at the time they were in place. And so that's how we modeled the layout. While we're here at this diagram, it's an interesting, or it's a good place to point out that remember I mentioned there were two power packs on this layout. One that controlled the east side of the railroad, this half, and one that controlled the west side of the railroad. So there were two engineers, you might say, at the throttle. Then all these colored circles represent toggle switches that controlled the section of track that's the same color. So you had a little spur up here that was controlled by that toggle switch, a little spur down here, three of them into the engine house that were each controlled by a separate toggle switch. So you could turn off the track where you, quote unquote, park a locomotive inside the engine house or next to the depot or whatever, or down here in the Miller Street Yard. So that's where we got the 6 people operating. You'd have one at the throttle east, one at the throttle west, and then one student controlling this set of toggle switches and another student controlling this set of toggle switches. And likewise over here, a throttle person up at the top, one toggle switch closer to the sugar mill, and then another toggle switch thrower further away from the sugar mill. So that was the design. That was to allow basically 6 kids to be operating at one time. Here, just to give you a notion of how this is the upper, in the last picture, this is the top of the diagram. The power packs were off to the side, wired in like this. These were separate from the platform because they could be disconnected, put in a box, and carried. We didn't want that extra weight or dimension on the platform itself for carrying purposes. And now you're looking at what the platform looked like as it entered the classroom before the kids ever saw any of this. So you can see there's just a sheet of plywood base. All the track is laid. It's all wired. All the switches are in place. You can see the individual switch stands, which, by the way, those same 4 people on either side operating the power toggles, they would also be responsible for throwing the switches to move trains into different places. And they were just done by hand with these little hand switch stands. There was a certain amount of building that we provided them. You can see here the basic structure of the sugar mill. On the other side of the divider, you can see there's some structure of the engine house, and down here there's a little bit of structure for the depot. It was their job, and you'll see here this in a second, to finish it. Do all the ground cover, do all the facades and painting of the buildings, to paint the additional buildings on this divider. You know, what else would you see down here near the sugar mill? And likewise on the other side, what else might you see downtown Santa Maria, in the vicinity of somewhere near the depot or the engine house? And here's more of a finished product. So we went from this coming into the classroom to this, which is closer to the end of the project. with getting close to when we would have open houses and that sort of thing to have other classrooms or parents come in and see what happened. So you can see the ground cover's in place. The buildings are more finished. There's the engine house. There's the depot. The pieces at the sugar mill are now painted. They have windows on that block structure. And here you can also see some additional structure just painted on the divider, kind of on the downtown side and kind of on the out by the sugar mill side. Okay, so one of the things we did, I think I mentioned earlier in the overview, that we had the kids design a logo, a patch for this project. And so every kid got to draw something that they thought represented basically the Santa Maria Valley Railroad. That's what we were trying. And surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, they all were very familiar with the fact that there was a train in town. You know, they probably heard it and or saw it once in a while, quite often. And we mentioned to them that we wanted to pick up on the colors of the railroad, which are basically yellow and green. And then they went to town. We didn't give them a whole lot more instruction. So you see on this slide, 6 of the 30 or so drawings that the kids did to submit. And then Lynn and I and Dad picked the one that we were going to make the patch from, and this is the one we picked. On the left, you can see the student's original drawing, and on the right, you can see the patches that we had made of that. Obviously, we cleaned it up a little bit and, you know, quote unquote, typed some stuff that they had handwritten. But there's what the patch looked like. And each child received a bandana, a red locomotive-looking bandana with this patch sewed on it. They also each had a name tag for the railroad, the Alvin All-Star Railroad. You can see there, and using the same logo once it was established. And they each had a first name tags, mostly for Dad and I, since we didn't know these kids nearly as well as Lynn did, at least initially. So it was very helpful for us for them to have name tags. One of the things we did was create a library of train books for the classroom, and there was about 24 titles in that library that the kids used for reference when they were doing their projects. They used them for reference on what the buildings should look like. When they were writing stories, there was a element to this of short story writing. And of those 24 books, probably half of them were kind of a kid level, and half of them were pretty adult level books that they used to help research their stuff. It's interesting in the picture, the Madson's book about the 3 Santa Maria Valley Railroads isn't pictured, but it was definitely part of the railroad. So was the Santa Maria Valley Red Book, I think. Who wrote the Gold Coast Railway, the Pacific Coast Railway books? Shoot, Johnson and anyway, that book was part of it too. I mentioned that they wrote reports on a lot of the stuff that they were learning, and up along the top, you can see some examples of some of the artwork they did. Finished product in the first 2, and on the far right up there is more in process work on the layout. You can kind of tell from here that they're working on the facades of the buildings, painting windows and doors and so on to make them look like buildings. One of the science projects was how steam locomotives work, and you can see here one student, Gustavo. This was his drawing that he made, and he labeled all the parts of the locomotive and so on. So that was kind of fun. That was part of the science integration. Other than these were reports and story writing and so on. In 2002, in this column is labeled here, and 2003 in this column. These are the titles of the various reports that were part of the project. And you can see the types of topics that the kids picked. They were able to pick from all the things that they were learning about. They could pick what they were going to fully research and do a big final report on. So we got the Reuben Hart House, Shumash Community, Central School. There was a fire in town, a big fire conflagration that some of them chose to write about. Sugar beets was intriguing to a couple of them. Shumash houses, the high school, Allan Hancock himself, William Ploxam himself, train signals, so on and so forth. You can see what a lot of stuff was covered, and they really came up with some great reports that we all got to hear eventually. We also took the kids out on field trips a number of times during the course of the project, which was probably 2 to 3 months long. I don't remember exactly, but something on that order. And we would come into the classroom, Dad and I, about 2 or 3 times a week. And then Lynn would do some of the other stuff that was more the integrated part, the history, the short story writing, the final report, etc. She would do that on her own. She didn't need us for that. So anyway, field trips. This was a field trip that we took to the Santa Maria Valley History Museum, which is right downtown. There's definitely a railroad element there. They talk about Hancock and the Santa Maria Valley Railroad to some degree, but they also talk about all the other history of Santa Maria that the kids are also being exposed to throughout the course of this unit. We took a field trip to the Santa Maria Valley Railroad itself, and the kids got to hear from the folks there about the railroad. They got to climb around on the locomotive. I don't really remember if they blew the horn for them, but I would imagine that they did. We went inside the engine house, and it just so happened at the time they had the 1801 opened up pretty good for. I don't remember if they opened the doors just for us, or if they were actually had some project going on maintenance-wise for the locomotive. And there's the group had their picture taken next to that tank car. You can see on the upper left the depot building downtown sits right behind it there. There's a favorite picture, not a high quality picture obviously, but had all the kids lined up along 1801. This was a field trip to the then Santa Maria Valley Railway Historical Museum or something like that. They don't exist, at least not in this format anymore, with having an actual museum location. But we went there, and the docents there showed us maps of the railroad system. They had a switching puzzle for the kids to try and work. They talked about some of the artifacts that they had, which are quite a few around actually, and photographs you can see on the wall here. So that was, at the time, a pretty valuable field trip, again, with this unit in mind. Here's just a couple other pictures of what the layout looked like coming into the classroom from different perspectives. Now you can see pretty clearly the depot building and the engine house back here and how the tracks worked into it. This on the right-hand side of the screen, the upper and lower, are both kind of ground level views of what the sugar mill side of the platform looked like, with nothing more than the track laid, powered up, and some trains. Which reminds me, we managed. I'll tell you one thing. I don't think I ever want to see any of these sugar beet kits from Red Caboose or Red Point or whatever that kit was. Oh my glory, that was a lot of work. We made about a dozen of them. And we also had, the Bachman made these GE 70 tonners. So a couple of them we actually had someone paint up or decal up for us to actually look like Santa Maria Valley Railroad. Excuse me. But then there were a couple that we just let them be the way they were, and we didn't worry too much about making them look like San Maria Valley. And this locomotive, the red one, which you can see here, and it's the same locomotive down here, is a Jeep 9, and it's red, which is, of course, what we were after, but it's actually labeled U.S. Army. It's a U.S. Army Jeep 9, but it was the right color, and we didn't. Again, it was one of those things that we just didn't manage to get done before we needed to go into the classroom. Was marking that up as San Maria Valley. On the left, we plastered as much of the classroom walls as we could with appropriate posters, paintings, pictures that we could related to the unit. And there you see a relatively famous painting of a Hancock airplane flying over a Hancock locomotive. And then another view on the right of what the platform looked like when it came into the classroom. Now here's some intermediate couple of photos of the kids working on building the layout, or finishing it, I should say. The best picture, of course, is in the lower right, where you can see the two girls here working on the ground covering part. They had sort of masked off the switches and the switch pieces so that they could put ground cover along the tracks, kind of looking like ballast and all that sort of thing. And they're working on similar stuff in the upper left-hand corner as well. There's another set of kids. Obviously, you could only put 6 or 8 kids around the platform at a time, depending on what you were doing. So the classroom was designed that the total classroom population was divided up into 3 or 4 groups that would rotate through centers. So a fourth of them would come to the layout. Another fourth of them would be at the short story writing. Another fourth of them would be at the realia, which I'll talk about in a minute, the artifacts station, and another one might be at an art project or a building history table or something like that. And then every 15 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever the interval was, I don't remember, Lynn would have them all rotate. And this group would go to the short story table, and the short story table would go over to whatever, and whatever would go to whatever, and that whatever would come over here to the platform and continue working. And that's what we would do for an afternoon. One of the two, actually both afternoons that we were there in the classroom. Here's Dad showing one of the students how to read a switch. In other words, how to tell which way a train's going to go that's going through the switch and how it needs to be set. This was a whole learning process in and of itself. We actually developed, I think it's in that slide, yeah, a couple of instruction sheets for the kids. The one on the right, of course, is the one about reading a switch, how it needs to be set for a train to move in a certain direction. And on the left, we also did a session, you might say, on hand signals. And this became fun because once they kind of learned the signals, they would use them when they were operating the trains. The toggle switch throwers and the switch throwers would communicate with the engineer at the throttle by using these hand signals. It was really cute. Here's a combination of two things going on. One, the girls are working on the building facades, painting them with the doors and windows and all that sort of thing. And in the lower portion of the picture, it gives you an idea of what we meant by the realia collection that came into the classroom for the unit. Basically, it's all the artifacts that were in my collection at the time to show them all the things that were bits and pieces of railroading, particularly back in the day, roughly. Here's some more construction going on. And you can see, wow, at this point we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kids, and maybe a 10th one around. That's a lot. But you know, when kids are doing it, they're not the fastest at this. It takes time to get them all going in the right direction. So it took a few hours. And in student hours, I wouldn't even want to guess how many student hours went into finishing the layout. Here you can see it's coming more along. We're starting to do the greener areas. You can see how some of the folks chose to wear their bandanas too. The two girls put them in their hair. Most of the guys wear it warm around their neck like you would imagine. That's what Dad and I did. Here's some work going on. I mentioned that they studied buildings. They used books to figure out how to paint or draw the designs on the buildings. And that is Madsen's book there, by the way, the one with the blue book cover of the 3 railroads in San Maria, or I forget the title exactly, but full of great info if you want to model any of those railroads. And of course, we had pictures of what it looked like. And here's a shot of the sugar mill, what it looked like at one point. All right, here we're a little more along the Dunn route. You can see their bandanas hung and some of their artwork hung on the wall in the background, both pictures. There really was a high line. We had 2 tracks on literally a high line. It was about 2 or 3 inches higher than the platform was that ran up to the sugar mill. And here on the other side is a couple pretty well finished ground level views, at least almost, of the downtown side of the railroad, where the depot and the engine house was. You can see the depot here. The engine house is not in place, which tells me that it's probably out on one of those art tables being having the walls and roof and so on painted. Same down here, it's not there. We also had a rogue Southern Pacific locomotive. And we had a kind of a rogue Mikado-like steam locomotive too here over on the right. Neither of which were labeled correctly for the, well, Southern Pacific, I suppose you could consider correct, but I don't know that they ever ventured downtown. Here's the sugar beets. We didn't, unfortunately, the growing season to get a real sugar beet is way too long for us. It's like 8 months or 6 or 8 months. It takes forever to grow those things. But we did have time to plant some seeds and get them growing. And on the right is about as far as they got in the few weeks that we had during the course of the couple months to get those up and going. But that was fun. They had a good time taking care of the sugar beets. Here's another ground level view of the sugar mill. There are a few more pictures. Now you can see the engine house is in place and it has been painted and some amount of windowing going on. And a couple of locomotives actually inside. Okay, this is getting more towards the end of the project where it was time to sort of show off the work. And that took a number of forms, the first one of which was inviting other classrooms to come to this classroom. And the kids would share with the visiting kids how they would show them the operation of the railroad, and they would do that. And I think this guy is signaling something. I'm not quite sure what, but he's obviously in control of the switches and toggles up by the sugar mill. And he's showing the visiting kids how we work the platform. Here, back in the back here, there's some kids showing off the realia table, the artifacts. And over on the right, lower right, we have some kids sharing either their short stories or their final reports. I'm not sure which. And there you can see too, by the way, it's a couple already wearing their bandanas, and there's the name tag on her string. So that was fun. It was, and we sort of considered this a dress rehearsal for the open house, which we did, inviting parents and other school faculty and administration, which we'll see here in a minute. Here's just another view of the basically finished layout, and their dad's watching this girl operate the switch and toggle as she shows the operation of the platform of the railroad to these younger kids that are visiting. On the right is kind of a good overview of the depot downtown side of the layout, and these are the two locomotives that were actually painted up and decaled for Santa Maria Valley. And here's what a couple of short stories looked like. I won't give you time, sorry, to read those, but you can find them on the website if you're really into it. And now these pictures are taken from an open house where parents, administrators could come and see, and were very well attended. The kids sold their parents on coming to see this project that they've been working on. So around the upper left here, you can see that some kids operating. Here's the two kids at the throttle, one at toggles and two over here at toggles and switches. And then standing at the other end are visitors, probably siblings, watching and paying attention to what's going on. Down in the lower left, the kids are explaining to their parents or family members about the artifacts that were in the classroom that they learned about. And over on the right, lower right, you can see a lot of milling around. The platform is actually up back here in the far corner that a lot of people are crowded around at the moment. But down here in the lower, closer corner of the classroom, the kids are sharing their final reports and short stories with groups of kids or parents for that. There's another shot on the left of the artifacts table, and then on the right there, a girl is telling the visitors something about one of the artifacts. There's some more classroom. Upper left is the sharing of the short stories or final reports. Lower right is just we took a shot of one of the classroom groups somewhere along the line. I don't even remember when. Here, this guy right here, if I remember right, was the superintendent of Santa Maria Bonita School District, who heard about this and came to see us. So that was kind of fun. The kids really got a kick out of showing him what was going on. And then on the right, more of the artifacts sharing. Let's see, why did we take this picture? Oh, this is sharing of stories too. You can see a couple of bandanas with the patches on them here. You can see all the stuff that we put on the walls. Oh, there's some G-scale cars just sitting there for fun too. And one of the parents brought in this tablecloth of trains. Since during the open house we did serve some little goodies. Here's a girl sharing her short story. There you can see some of the library in the background, as well as some of the other kids' short stories. Here's some operating going on. This engineer is showing something to the much younger guy who's pretty much face level with the train. Here you can get a better idea of how high the high line was, the difference between the platform level and the high line level. There's a few more pictures of the goings-ons. The second year we did this, it didn't work out the first year, and I don't remember exactly why. But the second year we did this, we took, when it was all said and done as sort of a final, you made it, congratulations treat, we took the kids on an Amtrak trip from Guadalupe down to Santa Barbara. And here's a picture of the class. You can really see all the bandanas and all the patches and all the name tags on the kids, or at least most of them remembered to bring them. And while we were on the right-hand side there, while we were at the Guadalupe station, of course, we took a look at the caboose, the Santa Maria Valley caboose that's out there. And on the left, there's three girls enjoying the ride on the Amtrak train. One thing, I didn't pictures of it, sadly, because I was so enjoying the moment. When we went around Honda Point on this train trip down to Santa Barbara, the kids all knew what Honda Point was all. They had studied that. They knew about the shipwrecks and everything. But they had some interesting thoughts about it that really weren't exactly accurate, like picturing that if they ever got to Honda Point, they might see some of those destroyers still in the water. So when I told kids we were coming up on Honda Point, it's like the whole car plastered themselves against the windows on the water side of the train, and anticipating. I was a little disappointing, I'm afraid, after they did that, but they were they thought for sure they were going to see some piece of a destroyer sticking up there at Honda Point. Now, lower left there is at Guadalupe as the train is arriving for us to get on. Upper right, the train has now arrived at Santa Barbara, and we've all gotten off, and we're heading for, actually we went to a place that does art with kids with scrap stuff, with recycle stuff. And it was very fun. But it had nothing to do with trains, so I didn't put that on. And then we just took the bus back home to make sure we got them back there by end of school time. And I think last thing I'm going to mention here is that this project was actually covered by KCOY TV. And here's a few screenshots from the broadcast when they did that. We actually went to the studio to be interviewed. Lynn and I did. That's the upper left-hand picture. The lower left picture, that's Lynn talking with a reporter or interviewer about it. And then the two pictures on the right, they also sent a camera crew to the classroom. And unfortunately, they didn't come at a time. They couldn't come at a time when the class was actively involved with the railroad. So they just got some, what do they call it, B footage for the segment that they did on the railroad of some platform shots and that sort of thing. And then what classroom project doesn't do thank you notes by the time it's over, right? We had the kids write thank you notes to everywhere we went, all the people who came into the classroom to talk about stuff. And so another way to integrate this whole project into, in this case, writing, kind of a writing exercise. And lastly, I just want to mention that there is a more formal report, you might say, than a website about this classroom project. This was an article I wrote actually for the NMRA bulletin, accepted, but never printed. But if you want to read the more formal report about this project, it's 10 pages long. It's not huge, and it will be one of the links on the chat page about this particular session. Okay, I think that's it. Let me say one more thing about the next upcoming stuff in this slide, and then I'll open it up, see if anybody has any questions. So this is always the closing slide. In the upper left, there's the address if you want to donate to the museum. That would be greatly appreciated. In the upper right, that's the address of the Parlor Card Chats page at the museum. It has all the completed chats, the ones we've done since May, I think, is when we started, and recordings of them, so you can go back and watch anyone you want to. There's an address there just underneath the chat address, this one, for feedback. There's a place where you can tell us what you might like to see, talked about, and that sort of thing. And then lastly, in the lower right, a promotion, a little advertisement, you might say, for our next Parlor Card Chat, which will be on December 5th. There will not be another chat through Thanksgiving. The next one will be on December 5th, same bat channels, same bat time. about the Fillmore and Western Railroad. It will be basically photos and stories. Story from a trip that the Friends of the Santa Maria Valley Railroad did, a little field trip to the Fillmore and Western Railway. Enjoyed some time at the railway. We rode the train down to Santa Paula, rode it back, had a great time. So if you're interested in seeing what's going on down there, or at least was going on down there back whenever this was, a number of years ago. By the way, though, I should mention, Fillmore and Western Railway is operating. Last time I checked, I think all of their November excursions were booked, but there was plenty of opportunity are still listed for December, kind of like a Thursday through Sunday schedule. They had miscellaneous trips you could take, some thematic, some just a train trip, some not all Thursdays, not all Fridays. We just look at the schedule if you want to see. So they are operating. Okay, let me go turn us all and see if anybody has any questions or comments. Oh, okay, well, I guess that was crystal clear. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you again on December 5th for a little chat, stories and photos about the Fillmore and Western Railroad. Have a great Saturday, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks. Great talk.